Next on Investigative Report. Incarceration Nation. Captives in the land of the free. The American citizen is taxed to support a broken prison system at a cost of $80 billion annually. The cost to house the average inmate may run as high as $70,000 per year. We pick up the tab for the officer that arrested this man at an annual salary of $65,000. Getting a clean court conviction in a full jury trial will run between $350,000 to $600,000. If the prisoner serves out his entire life sentence, it will place an undue burden on the taxpayer to the tune of $3 million. Maybe it is time to re-examine why we pay $13,000 a year to educate a public student and $65,000 per year to lock that student away. We try to discover why America leads the world in incarceration populations greater than non-free nations like Russia and China combined. And now, Incarceration Nation. Captives in the land of the free. The average American of any economic background carries a belief that at any moment they may be pulled over in their vehicle, harassed, and ultimately arrested by a police officer. In certain neighborhoods where over-policing exists, people are afraid of being stopped and arrested just for walking down the streets in the land of the free. Now mind you, this is not a communist nation, not a banana republic. But the arrest is not the biggest fear in losing one's freedom, but merely the first step into being introduced into a system that is profit-driven. And this report will show you that. Now whether a citizen is charged with a misdemeanor or a felony, they run the risk of being fired from their place of employment, which causes a cascading effect that ultimately ends in their poverty. You can't afford to be locked up in jail when you're supposed to be in work Monday morning prompt. For example, if you are on your way home on a Friday night and you are being pulled over and arrested for any reason, then chances are you're going to miss that next critical day at work. If your job has a one absence and done policy, you can rest assured that your income is going to be affected. And a lot of people face this even without being arrested. Simply put, most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck with a mountain of debt despite the level of their income. If you lose your job and you have a mortgage to maintain, you had better replace that income as soon as possible. You can't afford to miss a day's work. Now, post-pandemic lenders are all too happy to foreclose on a borrower who is in the arrears. We are no longer in a pandemic state. They can do that legally now. Car dealerships don't waste too much time either at repossessing a vehicle where a car owner can no longer afford to pay the payments. And marital partners who had an attachment to the life that they lost because of the arrest tend to leave at the first signs that the ship is sinking. I guess so much for death do us part. Negative happenings that overcome unsuspecting citizens cause hatred towards the police department and a distrust of government, local or federal. Now, fee-based profits that drive revenue for local governments at the expense of its taxpaying citizens anger entire communities and in some cases lead to riots. And in this report, you will find that out as well. The Harvard Law Review printed an article that gives us a glimpse at how these fee-based services work in the favor of states over the tax-paying citizens. You see, apparently states are turning their tickets and fines over to private contractors for profit. So it's sort of like if you get a bill from the hospital and you don't pay it, they turn it over to a collection bureau. So now states are doing this. In the late 1980s, Missouri became one of the first states to let private companies purchase the probation system of local governments. How could this be legal? But it is. In these arrangements, municipalities impose debt on individuals through criminal proceedings and then sell this debt to private businesses, which pad their debt with fees and interest. So you pay to the court once, and then it is sold to somebody else and they pad that with debt and interest. Now, this debt can stem from fines for offenses as minor as rolling through a stop sign or failing to enroll in the right trash collection service. Now, I'm not joking about this. Failing to enroll into right trash collection services, and I'll give you an example of this case. At one session of a local government, a large group of defendants was waiting to resolve tickets for failing to subscribe to the municipality's trash collection service, an infraction that many defendants felt was just another way for the municipality to make money off of them. And local government does this all the time. Now, one man insisted that he did in fact get rid of his own trash, and that he couldn't afford a subscription to the only city-approved waste collection services, as if it was a scam, just to get money. And when you live in the rural parts of America, you can get rid of your own trash. And in the town of Ferguson, Missouri, residents who fall behind on fines don't appear in court after warrant is issued for their arrest. Or if they arrive in court after the courtroom doors close, they are charged an additional $120 to $130 in fine. Now, along with a $50 fee for a new arrest warrant and 56 cents for each mile that police drive to serve said warrant. Now, if they don't do that, once arrested, everyone who can't pay their fines or post bail, which is usually set to the equal amount of their total debt, is imprisoned until the next court session. Now, that wouldn't be insane enough, but the court sessions only appear 3 days out of a month, so you're stuck in jail. Anyone who's in prison is charged $30 to $60 a night by the jail. So now you have to pay like you're paying Motel 6. Now, if an arrestee owes fines in more than one of the St. Louis County's 81 municipal courts, they are passed from one jail to another to await hearing in each town. That, my friend, is a racket. Now, the number of these arrests in Ferguson is staggering. In the year 2013, Ferguson's population was around 21,000 as per the U.S. Census Bureau, and the municipal court system issued 32,975 arrest warrants for nonviolent offenses. In effect, there were more warrants issued than citizens of the town of Ferguson. The city of Ferguson has a per capita income of $20,472, and nearly a quarter of residents in that town, or over a third of children, live below the poverty line. So I dare say that they cannot afford to pay one more dime to a city system. And though many of these towns surrounding St. Louis draw significant revenue through their courts, in Edmonston, another small St. Louis town, the mayor told local police in 2014 that evidence of a downturn in traffic and other traffic-written tickets was disappointing. And he reminded officers that tickets add to the revenue on which the police department now, their budget is established and will directly affect pay adjustment at budget time. So this is sort of like blackmailing your police system into going out and writing tickets. Now, Ferguson is an outlier. In 2013, its municipal court issued over twice as many arrest warrants per capita as any other town in Missouri, which I told you earlier. In a minute, we'll come back and we'll get even ridiculous into this particular case. Widespread hostility towards Ferguson's municipal court is the tinder that helped set the town on fire after Michael Brown was killed by police officers. Now, Professor Jelani Cobb visited the town just after the shooting and saw this hostility as one of the intertwined economic and law enforcement issues underlying the protest. So a lot of people thought that was just about race. The cops have been treating people like second-class citizens and fining them for a long time before that. He said, "We have people who have warrants because of traffic tickets and are effectively imprisoned in their homes." A resident told this to Cobb. He said they can't go outside because they'll be arrested. In some cases, people actually have jobs, but decide the threat of arrest make it not worth trying to commute outside of their neighborhood. In effect, they are prisoners of their own town and their own homes. Now, these trends of allocating police according to profit and criminalizing poverty to raise revenue extend well beyond St. Louis to the other cities across the United States and its territories. Selling jail time or selling fines is a money-making business. In April 2012, Tom Barrett was arrested for stealing a can of beer from a convenience store in Augusta, Georgia. When Barrett appeared in court, he was offered the service of a court-appointed attorney for $80. Now, Barrett refused to pay and pled no contest. Now, a lot of cases when you plead no contest, it's done. Now, this was to his shoplifting charges of one beer. The court sentenced Barrett to a $200 fine plus a year probation. Wow, for one beer. Now, Barrett's probation terms required him to wear an alcohol monitoring bracelet, even though Barrett's sentence did not require him to stop drinking alcohol, and the bracelet would thus detect all the alcohol Barrett chose to drink with no particular consequences. So we're back into a money-making scheme of putting a bracelet on a man despite him drinking alcohol. They won't even charge for that. They're just selling him the bracelet. And he was ordered to either rent this bracelet or go to jail. Now, it gets funnier from here on. The bracelet cost Barrett a $50 startup fee, a $39 monthly service fee, and a $12 daily usage fee. Now, though Barrett's $200 fine went to the city, these other fees totaling over $400 a month all went to Centennial Offender Services, which is a private company. So in the land of the free, we're paying money to a private company to imprison its citizens. Unable to pay Centennial's fees, Barrett spent more than a month in jail before he convinced a friend to lend him the $80 startup fee. So would you lend me $80 so I don't have to go to jail? But Barrett, whose only source of income at the time was selling his blood plasma, struggled to keep up with Centennial's fees. I can't pay a monthly fee because I have to sell my blood to live. Barrett said you can donate plasma twice a week as long as you're physically able to. He said I donated as much plasma as I could, and he took that money and threw it on the leg monitor to make payments. As Barrett began skipping meals to pay Centennial, his protein levels dropped so much that he was ineligible to donate plasma. They won't let you do it if they think you're going to get sick. After Barrett's debt grew to over $1,000 in fees from Centennial, they obtained a warrant for his arrest. Barrett was arrested and told by a judge that he could stay out of jail if he paid Centennial several $100s. So you owe $700 for a beer. You're on probation with an ankle monitor for a beer. The Ferguson riots briefly gained national attention, but for many Americans it was not that much of a surprise because we all live in communities where elected officials utilize the same tactics. In 2015, New York City took in almost $1 billion from fines, with fines and fees funding 37% of the city's budget for that year. Imagine that, 37% of the budget. Parking violations were the biggest earner in categories of fines, with $565 million collected alone. Now, the people who write and issue these citations work for the New York City Police Department and wear police uniforms. That does not say that they are officers, but they do wear the uniform. We'll be back in just a moment. Getting a traffic or parking ticket can ruin anyone's day. But it's worse when you receive a citation for a violation that isn't even illegal anymore. As of 2008, it is perfectly legal to park your car in front of a pedestrian ramp that is in the middle of the block, and that's in New York City. Now, the parking enforcement is not supposed to give you tickets for that anymore, but they're still issuing tickets that cost $165 a piece for this violation. Now, there are even instances of people who don't live in New York City, let alone New York State, who are receiving citations in the mail for violations that never happened, never occurred. They're made up. These injustices are being perpetrated by officers that are either incompetent or corrupt. But these acts are also being enabled by a system whose primary purpose it is to extort the public out of their money in order to fund an oversized, over-bloated government that can't be sustained with just taxes alone. Now, whether it's local government, state, or in Washington, D.C., we're familiar with governments that you spend more than they take in. There's a belief in the New York City area that you're more likely to be issued a ticket at the end of the month. A lot of people don't believe so, but this is true. Now, it turns out that there's data to back this up. Jonathan Albuck of the City of New York Daily News reviewed 2 years of NYPD statistics and found that there are on average 25% more tickets issued on the 30th of the month than there are on the 1st of every month. Amazing. Why at the end of the month and not continue into the month? We're trying to make a budget. According to NYPD officer Adil Palanco, the culture within the department is that if you are not issuing tickets and making arrests, then you're not doing your job. Now this incentivizes the police to go out and find violations when there are no obvious ones in view. Now listen to this, no obvious ones in view. So if you see a lot of people get arrested, just like the television show Cops, think about that. New York City officials deny that there's a quota system, but at the same time, they projected revenue of $5.86 million from parking fines in 2017. Now, if that amount is not matched or surpassed, the next time, then politicians will blame the police for not doing their jobs as a reason for the budget shortfalls. Think about it again when you see arrest. Is it really a legitimate arrest? Police officers are well aware of the pressure placed on them and their role in providing for the city's budget. Now, going back to 2015, rank and file officers engaged in a slowdown to protest against Mayor de Blasio at the time, where they wrote 92% fewer tickets at that time when they were protesting against them than they did a week before, along with 56% fewer arrests made. So it's like a work slowdown. Now this period when they did this did not see a spike in crime, and then Police Commissioner Bill Bratton even claimed that crime was declining over that period. So we once thought that more police in public would make us safer public. But is that true? This brings me to the next phase of imprisonment in the land of the free. If this fee-based system arrest works so well to raise revenue, why don't communist countries use it? At least they don't have to have in their title the land of the free. I will never understand how in a free nation you can get arrested in this way. Now, the shadow communist country of Russia has a population of 143.4 million, which is less than half of the US. Now, this population has 400,000 prisoners behind bars in Russia, or 1/5 of what we have locked up. Now, you would think that a nation that does not celebrate freedom as much as we do, enshrined it in the Constitution, would have more people behind bars. So if Russia is a so-called not communist nation anymore, which they are, like a shadow communist nation, yet they have less people locked up than we do. Now, a communist nation, which is China, has a current population of 1.412 billion people, or 4 times our population. But China's prison population to date is 1,690,000 Chinese, and we have more. It would seem that the land of the free post-emancipation is practicing antebellum codes on its freed citizens. How can we have more prisoners than a communist nation of China? In the late 1980s, I spent 3 years living in Wiesbaden, Germany, myself. It was there that I noticed a dramatic difference in the policing styles between America and all of the European nations. And not once in my 3 years of living there was I ever pulled over in my personal vehicle or accosted like a criminal for simply walking down the city streets. I felt more safe there from arrest than I did in the United States. Now, I love the United States. That's why I'm back here today. Now, in a land that was once dominated, Germany, by Hitler, you would believe that there would be a more tyrannical arresting system. But if you compare the difference in population and imprisonment in both countries, you would be perplexed why this is going on. Why not Germany? Why the US? You see, Germany has merely 57,000 German citizens behind bars. 57,000 German citizens behind bars out of a population of 83.2 million people. Once again, Germany is the country that we as citizens badmouth for their rates of incarceration during Hitler's nightmarish reign. So one time Hitler imprisoned just about anybody that he didn't like. Now, let's compare and contrast the rate of incarceration in America to its current census data. The U.S. currently has 2,068,000 citizens behind bars, on parole, or probation out of a population of 331.9 million people. 1 in 55 U.S. adults, nearly 2% of the population, was on probation or parole in the year 2016, the most recent year for which data was available. A population increase of 239% since 1980. The rates vary considered by state. It's different. In essence, we have a better chance of being arrested in America than winning any of the 45 states' lotteries, even the Mega Powerball. You see, in America, the biggest misconception is that race also is the biggest deciding factor when placing people behind bars. A lot of people think that it's because they're racist. Let me give you something about that. Other people cry that there are more men arrested than women for the same crimes. Now sure, all these factors are true. But this report highlights that all races or genders arrested in America are merely pawns in a financial game to cover the expenditures of city-state budgets. It is a good business to lock up a free citizen. If there was no money incentive, there would be no arrest. Now sure, the major media seeks to divide the U.S. population to ethnic and gender categories and arrest and imprisoning rates. It's good for media. Now for those of you who do not know, I'll give you the facts about incarceration and the previous numbers now. Now, as far as incarceration, men make up almost half of the total U.S. population of America, but are a majority, 91% of the incarcerated population in prison. 91%. Women are just 9% of the incarcerated population in prison, but this portion has doubled since 1970. Now, women also make up half of the United States and then a little bit over, but they only represent 9% in prison. Women account for 23% of adults on probation and parole, but only, like I said, 9% in prison. Now, the vast majority of research shows that adult female offenders tend to receive milder sentences than their male offenders. We'll be back in just a minute to dig deeper into this. In the United States, men are mostly adversely affected by sentencing disparities between given twice as likely to be sentenced to jail after conviction than women, and receiving on average 63% longer jail sentences for the same crime. Of that number of imprisoned males, 30% are black. Blacks are arrested 2,300 times out of 100,000 people, while their white counterparts are arrested 450 times per 100,000 people. But this is not an investigation into racial or gender disparities in sentencing in prison, as much as it is chasing the billions of dollars for profiting in the making of arrest. Like I said before, there is money in arresting people. If it were not, there would not be as many arrests. So you may have a better example of how we waste our monies locking away free people. We will use New York City as a model for this next particular story. The New York City Department of Corrections report more than $1 billion in annual expenditures for the year 2021. That staggering amount is enough to build 143 elementary schools at a cost of $7 million a piece. $7 million a piece if you add in all construction, contractor fees, total expenditures. Now, if President Biden wanted to take that and finance tanks for Ukraine, that amount is enough to buy 100 Abrams tanks right off the assembly line, full price. On a larger scale, if we took $50 billion we spend on prisons across the United States total, we could fix every road and bridge in America with 3 years of savings from that money. Now, $1 billion is enough to build 5 hospitals in New York City, so instead of paying for the prisons, you could pay for hospitals. The national average to build hospitals costs between $60 million and $187.5 million on average, and that's with everything including contractors and all equipment. In New York City, the average fast food worker can expect at best $31,000 per year as a salary. Now you could pay an additional 33,000 individuals more jobs if you didn't use that $1 billion for prison. Now instead of wasting that money to imprison free people, we can spend it on infrastructure. A November 2019 report by the Federal Highway Administration says doing all highway work deemed as cost beneficial would cost nearly $136 billion per year. So the annual rate that we spend on prisons across America, the $50 billion, in less than 3 years, you could pay for every road and every bridge being rebuilt in this country. Now, at that rate, the city could afford to build another World Trade Center in 4 years instead of paying more money than it takes to stay a night in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel per prisoner. So we're about to find out just how costly it is to be a prisoner overnight in New York. As of 2021, the average daily cost rose to $1,525 per individual per day to house in New York City jails. That translates to more than $500,000 per year for every incarcerated individual. More than half of those annual expenditures comes from non-Department of Corrections costs, such as fringe benefits, pensions, and medical services for the guards, not for prisoners. Now, in an Interrogating Justice report, according to the NYC Department of Corrections report distributed in December 2021, daily jail populations have decreased, mind you, listen to me again, daily jail populations have decreased by more than 60% over the past 10 years. 60% decline. But New York City jails housed an average of 12,790 individuals per day in 2011. By 2021, that number dropped to an average of 4,961 individuals. However, annual expenditures rose from about $900 million in 2011 to over $1 billion in 2021. The number of prisoners goes down, the number of costs to take care of those prisoners went up. Now, even when factoring in inflation, the rise in expenditures far outpaces the declining prison population. The picture is even bleaker when one considers that the Department of Corrections moved 17 and 18-year-old individuals to juvenile centers in 2018. So they took the 17 and 18-year-old individuals out of the main prison. This should reduce costs. This move resulted in a 4-year decline in the prison population of more than half. Now, given the move, the drop in annual expenditures is marginal at best. There's a cost fixing, there's expenditures here that don't make sense. I smell an audit. Now, more than half of annual expenditures comes from non-department corrections costs, such as fringe benefits, pensions, and medical services, which I told you before, in all major cities. Now, while some states struggle to staff prisons, New York City prisons employ more officers than average daily incarceration rate. Now, NYC Comptroller Stringer's report shows that New York City's Department of Corrections, listen to this, has employed more officers than the daily incarceration rate for the past 6 years. So in essence, they employ more guards than they have prisoners to watch. How's that possible? 1-to-1 ratio would be amazing anywhere, but in New York, this is not a problem. The ratio of correction officer to incarcerated individuals was 1-to-1 in 2016. As of 2021, that ratio is roughly 1.6 officers per incarcerated individual. While the daily incarcerated population is little under 5,000 individuals, the Department of Corrections employs over 8,000 correction officers. Wow. So that means there should be less crime or less angst within the prison. You got so many officers. Now, staffing 1,000 more officers than New York City jails is not the only problem. Comptroller Stringer's report shows increases in overtime for officers as well. Like I said, it is a money business to arrest people off of the street for no certain reason and put them in jail. New York City prison costs may be increasing, but incarcerated individuals are not any safer. One of the most alarming things about Comptroller Stringer's report is that the rising cost for incarcerated individuals does not translate to safer prisons. As I said before, watch out, it's coming. We have more guards, the prisons should be safe, and so should the guards. Now, in fact, reported fights and assaults rose from 581 per 1,000 average daily population in 2011 to 2,260 per 100,000 in 2021. In other words, assaults and fights rose at roughly the same rate as annual expenditures over the past decade. This is going in the wrong direction. The picture is worse for assaults on staff. The Department of Corrections reported 42 assaults on staff per 1,000 average daily population in 2011. For 2021, that number spiked at 235.2 assaults on staff per 1,000 individuals on a daily population. This is going in the wrong direction. As we close, I ask you to remember that the United States leads the free world in prison rates, but we also lead every other communist nation and banana republic in the number of people we deny freedom to. And this is post-antebellum time period. For Investigative Report, this is Charles Rivers. We thank you for watching.